woman comes to me and says, I have like no sex drive, I feel bad for my husband. I hear that like 3 times a week. And I'm thinking, gosh, I really want you to like, feel good for yourself.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Partner's great. We can get you well matched with partner. It's all about being on the same page.
Welcome to My MD Unscripted, where healthcare gets personal and the script gets tossed. I'm Dr. Clint Carter, ER doctor turned direct primary care freedom fighter, on a mission to challenge how our healthcare system treats patients in America. In every episode, my expert guests and I dive into real conversations about what's broken and how we can fix it by making healthcare about people, not just managing disease. It's time to rethink what healthcare should be and how we can make it better together. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome back, y'all, to the My MD Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Clint Carter, and I am honored, and I mean that, to be joined by Dr. Trish. So Dr. Patricia Wallace is a urogyne specialist and so much more in California. We've met through BTL conferences and other things. And so I was honored to see her pop up as a guest on the podcast. And we share a lot of common interests, and there's so much for me to learn from her today. I can't wait. Trish, I'm going to let you introduce yourself here. But first, I am going to say that you're double boarded in gynecology and pelvic medicine, and you're a national speaker, a yoga instructor, an autism warrior mom. I did not know that. And someone who's redefining what feminine health and strength really means. So the question I'm going to ask and then hand it over to you is, we often think of strength training as something for the gym, abs, biceps, quads. But what if the most important muscles for vitality, confidence, and even intimacy were the ones you can't see? So Dr. Trish, tell us a bit more about yourself and take it away.
Thank you so much, Clint, Dr. Carter. It was
Nah.
such an honor to meet you. And I think we just clicked, and I'm like, I have so much to learn from you. And that's, to me, the most amazing thing about being a speaker for BTL and getting to meet different physicians all over the country and sharing our stories and our successes and our tips and our sort of stumbles. And so thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. As you mentioned, I'm double boarded in gynecology and female pelvic medicine and reconstructive surgery. I'm the owner of the Center for Pelvic Health and Wellness in Southern California. And that means that I take care of all things pelvic and sexual health. I do reconstructive surgery for the female anatomy, specifically when things, go wrong post childbirth. We also, though, have a very busy practice, lots of UTIs, which is bladder infections, overactive bladder, pelvic pain as it relates to the pelvic floor, which we're going to get into, sexual wellness, menopausal health. And really, since about 2009, I've been talking about this concept of wellness. And I think that comes from my background of fitness. I've been an instructor since I was 20. I'm now 56. And I was just thinking about this earlier, and I'm thinking, gosh, most of us are playing catch up with
Yeah.
trying to gain muscle. But I've been lifting since I was 15, when the football coach threw the cheerleaders in, the cheerleading coach threw us in the football room to lift weights with the football dudes. And I was hooked. And maybe the next endeavor is to get out to those 20-year-olds and say, lift now, because
Yeah.
you will be laying down the foundation for your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So a little sidetrack there. But yes, I'm passionate about fitness, about women's wellness, couple wellness, sexual wellness. I mean, that all stems from my specialty in the feminine area. It's such an intimate part of our bodies. Not everybody can approach the exams, the questionnaires, and then come up with a plan that, women are going to just sort of really spill the beans, and you can improve their quality of life and really change their lives. I can't tell you how many times a week I hear, you gave me my life back, or I feel like myself again. I can run with my kids. I mean, all the things. It's just an honor to take care of women, and I want to continue to learn it and do right by my patients.
I know, before I got into sort of this area, especially with some of this stuff we're going to talk about soon, is we didn't ask those questions because there was nothing we could do about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was a little that could be done, very little of it by me. What's fun is that you've got all the tools from, reconstructive surgery to, weightlifting to everything in between. So, you know, we thought muscle mattered for longevity. And then as it turns out, it matters way more than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then, now we're really like, we're bringing it down. They say your grip strength after age, 65 or whatever, correlates to your life expectancy. Well, we're getting more specific than that, and we're going way younger than that. So tell me what you mean by core to floor, because I've
Mm-hmm.
seen that, and where you think that comes into this whole muscle matters bit for our patients.
Sure. So as you've heard me speak, and I was not even aware of the sort of correlation till I started to again bring my fitness background into the fact that I'm a pelvic floor surgeon and a pelvic health specialist. Our core, as most of us think of, is made up of our abdominal muscles, and a lot of us will think of our back muscles as part of that, but we don't really think about the bottom or the foundation, which is the pelvic floor, and it's made up of many muscles that have very long names, but most of us think of those as the Kegel muscles. And that pelvic floor is really responsible for stabilizing our upright trunk over our lower body. And as we came from walking on all fours to standing up in the evolution of man. I also have a physical anthropology background, so that's my bachelor's is in physical
That's
anthro,
awesome.
which is actually the study of anatomy of the human body and how we've changed through time. So it was sort of an interesting just to bring it all back and go, gosh, our pelvic floors stabilize everything. Every muscle connects to the pelvic floor some way because the hips are connected to the pelvic floor. The spine is connected to the pelvic floor, the abdominal wall. The pelvis, the bony pelvis is the structure at which the pelvic floor holds things together. So other people, call it the cradle of civilization, but to me, it's the foundation of the core. So core to floor means being strong from the inside out because you're not truly strong until your pelvic floor is strong as well. And it's really hard to gain strength there
Yeah.
because most of us don't really have an awareness of those muscles. We think we do, but we really don't.
I mean, I definitely know that I don't. Trying to do a Kegel it's a funny thing to watch a group of dudes try to do a Kegel. From across the room, you can be like, yeah, that's not right. But it's your expertise and your experience of the reconstructive surgery part and the sort of knowing where it all goes wrong. When did you sort of connect the sort of the surgical pathology, the things you're trying to fix with sutures and surgery, that you were able to connect, hey, what we really have here is a lack of strength and sort of that fullness of the core?
So thanks for asking that. That's really interesting. As you're asking me that, nobody's really ever asked me that before. What popped into my mind first is when we are doing OBGYN as a specialty, because that's the foundation of urogyne, which is 4 years and then 3 extra years of surgery. So I did 7 years. You get thrown into delivering a baby and repairing a pelvic floor as an intern when
Yeah.
you have zero knowledge about
Yep.
the pelvic floor. And I realized by the time I was a third-year resident, I go, oh, okay, those are the transverse perineal muscles, the ones that are here. Those are pretty much the ones that we come into contact during childbirth. As I went through my training and started to do, again, muscle repair is not as common as is the soft tissue repair. So when we do pelvic reconstructive surgery, we're not really touching the muscles very often because those are like, I'm going through the gateway, right? And then I'm going in there. But when anal sphincter repair and perineal reconstruction, that is absolutely muscular repair. Here's the problem. If I'm doing that in a 50-year-old
Yeah.
who's now had a atrophied tear from when she gave birth in her 20s or 30s, that muscle does not function like it could and should. And so I started thinking like, well, gosh, and they compensate their whole life until they hit menopause.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a second, those same muscles are torn, but all of a sudden we're having trouble controlling bowel and urine. And it turns out that it's the atrophy of the muscles, the loss of the hormones, the compensatory mechanisms that now lead to those secondary problems. Putting that all together, if you have a strong foundation, even if there's a trauma to that, like a childbirth whether it's an uncomplicated vaginal birth or it's something that has more traumatic implications to the pelvic floor. If you walk into any surgery, pelvic floor, knee surgery, back surgery, neck surgery with strong muscles, you are going to do better.
Yep.
It's just fascinating to look back at it and go, I do less surgery on the musculature of the pelvic floor than I ever did. Of course, the soft tissue doesn't always, go back where it's supposed to when the muscles are strong, but it's a whole new way of thinking of the body. It's really fascinating.
Well, and I love that, even the soft tissue repair that's not you're repairing muscle, it's usually, I'm assuming a little bit here, often a secondary effect of weakness from something else. So unless, you tear an episiotomy during a childbirth, that's not really the muscle's fault. However, downstream from that, if your muscles aren't holding things where they go and you start getting rectoceles or cystoceles or some of the other things that are going wrong, things are just starting to fall. And a lot of it is the weakness of the core and the floor and just the inability to address it, not even knowing what you would address if you knew what to address.
And so how I look at that differently, because everybody's like, well, gosh, if I have a strong pelvic floor, is it going to prevent prolapse? Is it going to make my
Yeah.
prolapse better? And what I tell my patients is that, look, when your pelvic floor and your core is weak, you hold your body differently. You lift things differently. And so I do think if we were stronger and had more muscle awareness in the pelvic floor on up, we would have less prolapse because we would lift and carry ourselves differently. I mean, you have to recognize that, pushing a watermelon through someone's vagina has connective tissue damages and tears. And as we have babies much later in life, our ability to repair that connective tissue, because we don't make new collagen after the age of 30 or whatever it is, that, yes, those things they're still true damages. But if you have a strong pelvic floor, even after the fact, or you develop a strong pelvic floor, you have much less chance of things coming down. Even like if I'll do a surgery, I'll tell my patients, like, we have to get you strong because you're still lifting the wrong way or bending the wrong way or, bearing down when you should be neutral or elevating. And that's going to have a big impact on recurrence of prolapse, because the risk of recurrence of prolapse and needing another surgery is anywhere from 10 to 29%.
Gosh. Yeah, and that's a big deal. So yeah, those surgeries aren't fun once. Okay, so hormonally, there's a player here, because you said it tends to flare up a lot, sort of, as soon as the menopause hits and a lot of those hormones are gone. What do you think the biggest factors are between, like, hormones, like you said, the trauma of childbirth and the like, current lifestyle practices, like how do we get to this spot?
I mean, obviously when I sit down with people, I'm like, optimal health, you need to drink, eat, and sleep. Those are the biggies. And then after that, you need a mindfulness muscle practice, and then you need hormone balance. Those are like the biggies that I talk about every single day in my consultations. And people are lacking in all of those things. So not one thing is going to fix, the issue. But I also understand that we're human, and I'm a super practical physician, and I'm not like, okay, you got to go to the gym 4 days a week and max out your reps. Yeah, that would be amazing. But most people, one, don't have the discipline, two, don't even have the knowledge. So they're going to push or hurt themselves the wrong way. So I'm like, okay, let's come up with a single day that we can do what we need to do. And once you feel confident, we're going to add a second day and so on. And I'm super practical. Nope, but so hormonally, as we age, 40s, women, men, it's a slow decline, but they really never stop making testosterone. Women, we fall off a cliff at 52 to 55. In those last 10 years, the perimenopause, late 30s to early 50s, we have higher fluctuations of estrogen and then lower troughs, right? So high, low, progesterone similarly, and then testosterone just declines over time. So as our hormones go down, that's when we start to see also loss of muscle, we gain fat, there's insulin resistance depending on, how our lifestyle is, it creeps in. Because we've lost muscle, it's even worse. And so that impacts our ability to not only have our optimal weight, but also to have optimal function, which is just to even, move about and take care of your daily things. I mean, not to
Right.
mention exercise.
Right. And then,
So,
we're sitting in front of computers or in a car or whatever else all day long anyway. But, God forbid you have a patient who's does manual labor for a living. They're not doing it in a way that's protecting their core and all of those things too, right? So you take care of women, obviously. Do
mhm.
you, how do you see a parallel? Do you see a parallel in men? I know that's not your primary practice. When you start getting the lack of pelvic strength there, what happens in the men, the husbands of these women that you're taking care of?
So I do some hormonal therapy for the husbands. I typically is like a couple wellness
Yeah.
and think of, optimizing them the same way. What's the muscle like? Is there creeping in a visceral fat? Once you start to see a little bit of that visceral fat around the abdomen, we know that their testosterone is low. Certainly if, they're having some other signs, whether it's be fatigue, poor sleep, sex drive is down, erectile dysfunction, that's all hormonally related, as well as is the health of their, arteries and the health of their glucose insulin system too. So I do a similar assessment for men that I'm going to take care of, and I always recommend specifically resistance training and hormone optimization as well. And I've been very successful at getting couples to be on the same page, literally. When a woman comes to me and says, I have like no sex drive, I feel bad for my husband. I hear that like 3 times a week, and I'm thinking, gosh, I really want you to like, feel good for yourself.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Partner's great. We can get you well matched with partner. It's all about being on the same page.
Right. Right. Well, then you have the ladies who are like, yeah, I don't care about sex, but neither does my husband. So we're fine. And you're like, no, you're not fine.
Well, true. And actually, if I don't push the issue if they're on like, if they're compatible on the same page, but not just the sex component, but if there's a drop in drive there, there's a drop in other things.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
quality of life, motivation, stamina, workout recovery, all the things that we don't really think of. And I'm really aware of the fact that the women in my practice that are in their 70s are the sickest group. And I say that because, and I just started to put it together 20 years ago when Women's Health Initiative came out and
Yeah.
everybody got taken off their hormones.
Yep.
Those women are now 70,
Yep.
75, 65, 75. Those are the patients who have the canes, the walkers, they're just in bad shape. Now, it's interesting, my ladies who make it through their 70s and their 80s and 90s, they're like these spry women. You can't even,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm looking at the chart going, wait, how old are you? I
Yeah.
just the other day, I had someone who was 93. There was no way she was 93.
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy. Just looking at the big picture, we've got to get it earlier. I think we can play pretty good catch up in our 50s and 60s, but if we make it to the 70s and we're not doing so great, I think it's a little harder to build back some of that momentum.
Okay. So for the fun part, we know what the problem is. What do we do about it? So, when you've got these ladies come in, you're talking lifestyle, you're talking hormones. What else do you have to offer? I mean, where do you go next?
So my consults always also include body comp analysis. So we get like a little baseline of where they're
Yeah.
at. And of course, the hormone analysis we talked about. And then I do have the high frequency electromagnetic energy devices in my office, originally getting the EMSELLA because the pelvic floor was like a no brainer.
Yeah.
And then really understanding the core to floor component of being able to build muscle on the abdomen and the pelvic floor at the same time. And I will say that someone like myself who actually has scoliosis and has lifted weights her whole life and really has a little bit of pain every day. And I think of one of our colleagues, Dr. Abdulamin, he's like, well, would you rather have more function and a little pain or less function and no pain? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll take a little bit of pain if I have more function. And I realize that even though I lift weights all the time, I'm exercising, I'm acutely aware of the asymmetries in my spinal muscles. When I EMSCULPT myself and I sit on my chair, I have very little back pain. And so, yes, originally these devices were made to build muscle and burn fat, and they work awesome for that. Like I
Right.
love, trying to get
Right.
all sculpted. But the whole functional application and now the pain
It's
indication,
crazy.
I'm just like, I mean, the FDA cleared the EMSCULPT NEO to be able to treat inflammation, muscle atrophy, postoperative venous, blood flow, I mean, pain, chronic pain, and just to get my patients to literally say, like, look, I want to help you. I
Yes.
want to build your muscle. I want to take you out of spasm. I want to help with inflammation. It just sort of, popped open this whole world of application that I had no way to help those patients.
Yep.
They're going to pain management, they're going to PT, they're getting injections, and they're still not well because that's kind of a band-aid. Nobody's fixing the foundational problem. And so it's just incredible. It's just incredible.
We've had such fun. I would say it's been fun finding out how the EMSCULPT. So a little background here, because I've done a poor job of sort of educating my audience, and a lot of my audience, are we're lay folks, and so the EMSCULPT is it uses a magnetic energy and a heat source to melt fat, tighten skin, and then make the muscles contract. The magnetic wave goes through there. Every muscle fiber has to contract, and then we can just decide how intense we want the experience to be. And so initially it was a cosmetic device. And then we found that as you strengthen, say, the abs, the back hurt less. If you strengthen the glutes, the back hurt less. And then we got these functional settings where you can put it on the back muscles and strengthen the back muscles and melt the fat that's between Dr. Abdul-Hamid that you referenced before. He says, our back strap muscles next to the spine look like fatty steak on an MRI. It's just got this gooey, marbling around that muscle, and that muscle is meant to hold that spine stable, and it doesn't do a very good job when it's fatty. So this EMSCULPT helps dissolve that fat and build the muscle at the same time, but somehow miraculously it also just makes it not hurt. It's amazing. And then that's the core, and then the floor is a chair called the EMSELLA that has the same technology built into the floor of it, where it sends this magnetic wave through the pelvic floor muscles, and you get a super maximal contraction of like a Kegel, but no kind of Kegel that you could do. And then we get, like 12,000 of them in 28 minutes or something crazy. So that's when we talk about these devices and how they're working for pain, they're working for muscle support, they're working for, just sort of getting stability and vitality back in some of these age groups. And then here we are talking about, like, man, when I get time and I think of it, I just take my computer and I set it down on a stand in front of my EMSELLA chair, and I just crank it up and start typing because it's so great. And we can talk about some of the benefits to the men as well. But so you're using EMSELLA on the pelvic floor, EMSCULPT. Are you doing EMFEM, any other sort of vaginal rejuvenation stuff as a pelvic floor combo?
Absolutely. And I do the same. I chart on the EMSELLA because there's no other way that you or I or anybody out there, if they go to PT for the rest of their life, they're never going to be able to cause the muscle to actually get bigger and stronger in the pelvic floor. And so we work with the physical therapist, say, like, my patients need to learn technique. They need to learn body mechanics, how to lift, what not to lift, how to bend, but, let me build them too at the same time. And obviously we all do better when we're treating something from many different aspects
Yes.
versus just a single, there's not a single answer to everything. So yes, in my practice, actually before the MFEM, which is the BTL radio frequency device that helps renew the vulvar vaginal tissues, I had a different device that was also radio frequency. And so that was my first wellness application in the practice over 10 years ago. And we added that because at the time, it was very controversial that women could not use vaginal estrogen cream when their tissues got thin if they had a history of breast cancer. Women are still scared to death to use estrogen cream. But at that point, it was like a no-go. Like the oncologists were like, no. So we had to add some sort of something to help our patients. And so we did radio frequency, which has been a game changer for the health of the vaginal and vulvar tissues. And not only does it restore the collagen, it helps with lubrication, it helps with tissue that is less elastic. So it really just restores the tissue. So if it's too tight or too loose, the tissue just turns into this healthier tissue. It certainly perks up the external tissue, which most of us, don't care about. But when we realize that we're sort of deflated down there, it makes us feel a little better. And then it helps actually because there have now been done sexual medicine studies in men and women. It helps with orgasm and lubrication. It reduces pain. It helps with arousal. By there then reducing UTIs, urinary incontinence, confidence, improvement, quality of life. So having healthy tissue down there for women hits so many aspects of our lives.
I mean, as a male, I mean, how many jokes since middle school have been about our tissue down there? Like it matters. And then to apply that to an intimate partner relationship that, goes on for decades, you've often said that sexual wellness is a part of total wellness. And
100%. It should be one of the branches.
yeah, should be. Much,
It's going
much.
to be on my wellness wheel, sexual wellness. It's a
Exactly.
subgroup of physical wellness,
Yeah.
physical and mental.
Have you had difficulty branching? I mean, probably not because of who you are and who comes to you and why they're there. But, sometimes it's hard to get, especially someone over the age of 60, whatever, to just start talking about their sex life or the lack thereof, or pain, or, a lack of wellness in that area. Or a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old, anyone. But how do you broach that topic and sort of blow through it and start getting into the wellness bit?
I mean, my questionnaires ask very specific questions, so
Yeah.
that makes it easy. So,
Yeah.
in a non-pelvic world, one would at least have a couple questions on their intake questionnaire about, are you sexually active? Do you have any pain with intimacy? Would you like your sexual wellness to be better? Something open-ended even might be helpful. And then you could always say, today we're going to talk about this, but I see here that this might be a concern of you. Would you like to talk about that? Maybe we'll come back next week and we'll just sit down and chat about how I can help you solo or partner. And so what's amazing, and it might just be my personality too, like you said, I've just sort of very down to earth with the patients. But I have these 80-year-olds tell me the craziest things.
That's awesome.
But it requires being a straight-faced, safe environment. There's nothing is going to surprise me. So I just sort of, I don't know. If you ask the question, eventually if you ask the question, you better follow up on the question. That's the first thing. If
Yep.
they mark it and you don't follow up on it, that's also not a great thing, because that means that they had enough confidence and enough, vulnerability to mark that off on your
Yeah.
questionnaire.
Yeah. Well, we used to not ask it at all. Now it is on our questionnaires, but we used to not ask it at all because if a woman had stress incontinence, and to some extent urgent incontinence, there's only so much I could do about it. And so now it's just so empowering to have tools in our practice that are, life changing, to lack of a better term. I was so surprised when we got our first trampoline park in my town and we took our kids and I was like, Steph, come on. And she was like, yeah, no. And I was like, what do you
Yeah.
mean, no? Come on, let's go. We're just jumping around shooting baskets in this little kid area. And she was like, I'll pee all over myself if I jump around in there. And I'm like, what? She's a physician assistant. I'm a doctor. We've been married a long time. We got 3 kids. How do I not know this is a thing? Like, it's just not spoken about. And it's, as if sex alone wasn't hard enough, but all of the incontinent complications. I mean, the famous stat is that we sell more adult diapers than baby diapers in this country. You find that to be a big part of this pelvic floor strength and wellness?
I mean, yes, I ask all the time, how many pads are you using a day? What type of pads? Like I'm a connoisseur. I know exactly what kind of pads people use, sizes, the whole deal. Now, getting someone out of diapers is difficult once they've reached the diaper stage, but getting them into sort of a thicker pad with undies and trying to get them confident. The hardest part for me is that once you start having significant incontinence, it changes what you do in your daily life. So, for example, your wife didn't want to jump on a trampoline. By the way, even after EMSELLA, trampolines are not awesome for women. If there's something about the rebound, it's the rebound that gets us. I'm telling you, it's like running down a hill. There's something that does something there. But, I have patients who are like, I don't want to leave the house. I want to go on this cruise, but I have to pack a whole separate suitcase of pads. Like they have to pay for a separate suitcase, right? Because if they're going to Europe, they don't know where they're going to find pads, or if they're going on a cruise. So it's a huge impact. And once we start to isolate, that's when we lose that mental component of wellness, and then we sort of go downhill. So if we can make just a little a little notch, excuse me, and like reduce that stigma, and then get them just a little bit, back to normal, that's all that most people want. And we have the opportunity to do a lot of prevention in our 20s and 30s through education and muscle building then, and then continue 40s, 50s, 60s. Like I said, once we're here, it's harder to gain back that function. So there's
Oh, yeah.
opportunities in the older years for sure to impact quality of life, but there's also all this opportunity to maybe prevent, which is where I'm super excited to follow things.
Yeah, wellness is so much about prevention. And I think people get that, but our system's not really built that way. And so everyone sort of agrees that wellness prevention should be a major part of wellness, but in the reality of the day-to-day of their own health, they're just busy, and when something catches fire, they put it out.
Yeah,
And so
100%.
getting the message, especially of your pelvic floor, like how are you gonna protect? That's such a giant hurdle to overcome because you don't even really know it's there. I mean, you give it, like you said, you're like, you don't even really know. So, that sort of brings you to some of the more fun, exciting new things in your career because you're not just a doc, you're a wellness coach, a yoga teacher, you're a speaker, you're reaching out, trying to spread the gospel, if you will, prevention and wellness, in the core to floor and beyond. I mean, you famously had a full muscle suit for speaking engagements and, super fit, strong woman. So how does all this play in trying to educate the next generation and sort of just spreading the wealth about all this?
I mean, certainly starting with things like awareness podcasts. If I had all day, I'd be like building social media and YouTube videos all day. That would be a dream, right? Right now, I still very much am a busy physician. I am in the office 4 days a week or 2 days in surgery, 2 days in the office, depending on the week. And so I fit it in when I can. The next stage as is going to be, in the office and then dedicated time to doing some of the creative things because there's a lot of influences out there who are talking about muscle, and then some are talking about hormones, and not a lot of people are putting it all together, right? I mean, nobody's talking about sexual wellness in the pelvic floor as it relates to muscle matters and it relates to hormones in a way that's cohesive, who has that background to be able to do that.
Yeah,
And
right.
so my goal is to really try to hone in on that and help women and their partners really live their best lives in their best bodies. That's one of my like bylines. And so, how can I do that? I continue to walk the walk and talk the talk and get the information out as often as I can, and just continue to take care of my patients because my patients, it's all word of mouth. And,
Yeah.
every day I hear, oh, you were on the Ladera Ranch Facebook group chat, and everybody's like, who you seeing? And so that's how it worked in my community. Somehow they're, or the ladies are doing mahjong or whatever game they're playing in their retirement community. And they're like, oh, you see Dr. Wallace too. And so there's only one of me here, and then there's a few others sprinkled a little bit further away, not that far away, but, just doing our best we can every day, taking care of the patients and being an example, I guess, a role model. I
Well,
wouldn't
yeah, I
like
was
to
going
be
to say, you
56.
you definitely don't look 56, and you've been, working out, whether knowingly or just because you enjoyed it your whole life. And so that gives you a great spot to sort of lean forward and lead by example. And, I've got a lot of patients, and I also have providers that listen because there's a lot of docs that are sort of stuck in the system wishing they could get out. And we do talk about a lot of great ways that are outside the box to take care of folks. And so what, it's not just about, like you said, it's not just about the urinary incontinence, every once in a while, or it's not just about sex isn't what it, I don't really, that's not a part of our relationship anymore. So we're over it. It's not just about that, but it's about sort of what that means. And it's about the travel, it's about the confidence. So what would you have both the listeners and the providers that are listening understand about the link between sort of the movement, the hormones, and so really empowering, we'll say women in this case, to, like you said, live their best life in their best bodies?
Well, I will say that most women have to advocate for themselves. The average woman probably goes to see 5 providers before they even make it to my office,
Yeah.
because we are so specialized and nobody's looking at the whole person.
Yeah.
Um, but, I think that is one of the advantages of probably of social media, and that there's more awareness now, more buzz. now that different influencers like Oprah and Halle Berry are going through menopause, and they're like, well, hell no, I'm not going to have hot flashes. And, so I'm like, okay, well, they're like, if Oprah can take hormones, so can I. I'm like, okay, that's perfect. Whatever Oprah says, but I would say that you have to be your own advocate, understand, what you want to do in 5, 10, 20 years. Like, how are you going to look at life and what kind of function do you want to have? Like, I want to be able to travel and hike and still roller skate and lift weight, play with grandkids on the ground. It's kind of like Peter Attia talking about like preparing for whatever decade he calls it, the last decade. It has a name. I can't think of it right now. I sit down and go, oh, okay, we're going to meet today and make your 30 and 50-year plan. Like at 50, we're making your 30-year plan and your 50-year plan. Like, what are we
Yeah.
going to do? So advocate for yourself, understand that there's not just a one answer to fix everything. So you do have to approach or demand from your providers more than just what they're offering. And if they're not offering, that's when you start to look outside of insurance, pays for illness, not for wellness.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are understanding that. And then, continue to be a part and create a community, because if once you sort of get into that community of wellness and of health, that's sort of a self-perpetuating life, and it's really a lifestyle towards longevity and towards mental and physical wellness. Everything else falls into place when you have those things kind of sort of mapped out a little bit.
I love that. I love that, because we talk about lifestyle and we talk about, planning for the future and training for your next decade and those kind of things at my practice too. But so much of it is, what I'm the most comfortable with. And what we really need is, a generation really of providers and physicians that will, ask the questions, put them in their question sets and look for the solutions. So, I'm the only person in the greater East Texas area, which, is a decent size area, that has these devices. And that's not okay. You need to, more providers have the power to help more people with some of these devices. And then really, it's like you said, education and making it a part of your lifestyle. So for listeners ready to start strengthening their core to floor, what's one simple step you'd have them take next?
So meaning they're not at the gym, they don't have a device, anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, just someone who's listening going, you know what? Yep. I have a lot of those problems. I need that. What do I do?
Well, certainly try to find a specialist who understands, and even a physical therapist, I think, would be the best step to start. But at home, like exercises that are like no brainers that you can do that are so important for building your core. Like if you're backing up to the wall and you're pretending like you're using the wall as the back of a chair and you're just lowering your bum like you're sitting,
Yeah.
isn't that called like an earthquake or something, where you're holding up the wall and you're
Yeah. Yeah.
that just just doing that alone is engaging your entire pelvic floor and core. Just
Huh.
pretending like you're sitting against a fake chair on the wall, legs are slightly apart. That's a great one. And then just sitting on a chair and getting up and down without holding on to the arms. Those kinds of like total body squats are
Yeah.
so important for building your core. Your quad muscles, that's also been one of the things equated to longevity, is the size of your thighs.
Yeah.
And all my life, I wanted these thighs to be smaller, but looks like they're going to carry me through to the end.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. No, having strong, the new, strong is the new thin, whatever. Muscle, 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 muscle. You feel better. You look better. You're going to feel better and look better for longer. Man, I love that that's the truth, because, before we started focusing on this stuff, it was more prescriptions and more prescriptions. So this is so much better in every kind of way.
It's so true. There's this doctor I follow on Instagram. I think his name's William Wallace, which is not related
That's
to me, but
it's funny.
I used one of his you know, posts, and it says strong people are hard to kill. And if you
Yes.
look at the fact that when you have more muscle, you have a lower chance of dying of any illness,
Yep.
including cancer, across the board to someone, and that's independent of age and race and gender and body weight in general. And then also having higher muscle content lowers your risk of dementia, which now, dementia is, up there with heart disease
Yep.
and fractures, so osteoporosis. All of those things respond when you have more muscle. And once you have it, you can sit on the couch and do nothing, and your metabolically active body
Yeah.
allows you to watch that movie, whereas, before, maybe you had to do a little extra work. So, I think that muscle matters and mind muscle matters. Like, those are the big things.
And for those that are looking for a place that has some of these devices, there's, I'm sure they're, a Google search away. You're looking for EMSELLA, EMSELLA. It's the chair that can do 12,000 Kegels in 28 minutes. The EMSCULPT NEO. But those are sort of that's the technology that should be augmenting your new lifestyle, your new approach to muscles and preparing for the next decade or two or three or five. I love that. I love that. So for folks that want to learn more, they want to follow Dr. Trish. How can people get a hold of you, follow you, keep learning from you?
So on Instagram, it's Dr. Trish MD. You have to spell out the doctor, DOCTORTRISH MD. And on my Instagram, I do a couple random weekend workouts with resistance bands. So one of the things I should have mentioned is that I carry a resistance band with me everywhere I go. It's in my purse, it's in my briefcase, so that I can actually do some muscle activation if I'm traveling on a plane, if I'm in a hotel room and I just want to get a little bit of exercise in. And Catalina is an island right off of here in Orange County in California. There's not a gym on Catalina, which is really weird.
That's funny.
I think there's not a single gym. And so thank God I brought my portable gym. And so I was outside at this little park where they have those kind of things. It's like an outdoor park gym. And I'm doing workouts and the deer are just walking right by me as I'm doing my little workout there. So on my Instagram, you'll see some workouts, lots of fun things and questions. And then Facebook, it's the Center for Pelvic Health and Wellness. So certainly reach out to me, and Dr. Carter has my information as well.
This was so fun. You're so awesome. I'm so excited that you're moving towards dedicated time for more creative endeavors. The world needs more of it. You have something to share that not many people do. So thank you so much for spending some time with us on my lowly little podcast as well. And I cannot wait to see you soon. Hopefully we'll cross paths again sooner than later. But in the meantime, thank you so much for coming on. And I just hope wish you all the best.
Thank you. You're awesome. And I look forward to having you on my podcast in the future.
Let's do it. That'd be great.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me today on MyMD Unscripted. I hope today's conversation opened your mind and inspired you to imagine a better path for your health and therefore life. If you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone passionate about transforming healthcare. Real change starts with real conversations, so let's keep them going. Until next time, stay well, stay curious, and never stop pushing for better.